Hello, everyone. Let's go ahead and let's talk about writing your rough draft and creating an APA paper. Before that, a quick announcement. I realized some of the assignments were having issues with submissions. Some of the submission settings had not been saved whenever I was creating the assignments, unfortunately. So those submissions are open now. If you have not turned in an assignment that had a submission issue, please go ahead and do it as soon as possible so that I can grade your work. Thank you. So let's go ahead and let's talk about writing your rough draft for your research essay. Much like your previous papers, you will have requirements you will need to meet to fulfill the assignment. So let's go ahead and break it down part by part. These requirements will also be posted onto ThinkWave in their own separate document so that you will be able to reference those while you are writing your paper and while you are bringing all the research you have done into a readable, easy to understand format. So let's go ahead and talk about your introduction. Your introduction should be the presentation of your thesis and topic you'll be covering for your reader. This section is worth 15% of your grade. Therefore, you should be stating your thesis clearly and stating your topics that you'll be covering in your body paragraphs clearly. These should be about 3 different topics you'll be covering. For your main body paragraphs, this is where you'll be presenting the bulk of your research and showing how your conclusions either do or do not line up with your thesis. This is worth 30% of your grade and is broken down to where it is about, because your paper is required to have 3 body paragraphs, breaks down to about 10% per body paragraph, per required body paragraph. Like I said, your paper should have at least 3 body paragraphs, but you can have more. If you feel like your argument would be better served in 4 or 5 body paragraphs, you can make your paper longer, but your paper should have at least 3 body paragraphs minimum. That should be the minimum amount you should be covering. Each topic, each body paragraph, should utilize at least one source, meaning that at least one of your sources should be used for each topic you cover. All of your sources should be cited at least once within the 3 body paragraphs. That means if you are going by the minimums, your 6 sources should show up somewhere cited within the main body of your paper, of your research essay. And of course, each paragraph should have an argument which supports your thesis. Whether this is how my thesis is actually wrong, or this helps supports and says, yes, my thesis is correct. Each paragraph should have an argument which builds upon your thesis which explains why this is right or why it's wrong. Your conclusion is how you'll wrap up your paper and calls your reader to either further action or further research. This in particular is worth 15% of your grade. Your thesis should be restated, and your topic should be clearly restated in this section. At least one sentence should be used explaining if your research has confirmed or rejected your thesis, the research question you're presenting. If it has rejected your thesis or research question, if you find you have created a research question and the research that you've done actually shows no, your research question is not that, your thesis is not that, the evidence is contrary to what I initially set out to do, you should explain what conclusion your research has found instead. You should also, at the end, include a call to action or a call for more research. Some type of call to have your reader continue what you have started. That's going to be the main requirements for the paper itself. So your paper should have an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Along with this, you should also have, there's some requirements for your sources. Your sources are just requiring and cover the sources you found for your annotated bibliography and how it's formatted. This is going to be worth about 15% of your grade. You should, in your paper, have a minimum of 6 sources used. 3 of these sources need to be scholarly sources. 3 of these sources need to be either from an accredited author or from an accredited organization. Whenever you are writing your paper. All your sources, when used in their body paragraphs, must have in-text citations. And we'll get over how to write those in a second. Your in-text citations should be APA formatted, and your reference page for your citations should be formatted also in APA, and we'll go over how to cite those in just a second. Now, formatting, these requirements cover how your paper is formatted, and again, we'll go over these in a minute. This is worth 15% of your grade. Your paper should be APA formatted according to the presentation guidelines. This is the presentation. Your paper should include a title page, and your paper should include a references page at the end. So this title page will be at the beginning, and we'll talk about that in a second, and your paper should include a references page, and that's going to be included at the end. Hi, Kitty. Sorry, my cat walked in. The last bit is that all parts should be turned in. This covers making sure you have submitted each part of the assignment and have completed each of the steps. This is worth 10% of your grade. It is literally a 10% give me, because you should be submitting each of these. So make sure your outline and your thesis are turned in, make sure your annotated bibliography is turned in, make sure your rough draft is turned in, and above all else, make sure your final draft is turned in. Now, whenever it comes to formatting your paper, and I will shuffle myself over here just to be out of the way. Really, you want to go out now? There we go. Sorry about that. Now, whenever it comes to formatting your APA paper, it's important to note that APA papers include a title page. Much like Chicago, your APA formatted paper will include some form of a citation page, or of a citation page, of a title page. I apologize. This will include a header for your title page, which will include the page number. This should start at 1. And then in the center will be the title of your paper, and then a couple spaces down, your name, the class name or class number, your professor's name, and the date that your paper was submitted. An example has been provided to you on the right. You can find other examples through Google of how to format these pages, but pretty much this is the standard format for a student APA paper. Now, for the main body of your paper, you should have 1-inch margins on all sides. You should have a 12-point readable font, something like Arial, something like Times New Roman. Those fonts are acceptable. Generally, it should be about 12-point font, as that font is very readable, very clear. You should have a header on each page with either your title of your paper or your name and the page number. So either it'll be your name and your page number, or the title of your paper and your page number. One of the two. You don't need to include the title, your name, and your page number. You just need to pick between your title or your name. The first line of each paragraph should be indented by 1/2 inch whenever you are writing your paper. Excuse me. For the in-text citation, APA follows the author date method of citing. Your format in-text citation should look like this. In parentheses, you should have the author's last name and a comma, and then the publishing date. So something like Harris, 2008. 8 would be an example of a publishing of a in-text citation and a publishing date. This in-text citation should be included before any punctuation. So that little parentheses, before you put an exclamation point, before you put a period, before you put a comma, anything like that, you should put that author's last name and publishing date in there. If you do not have the author name, you can include the title of the work itself, self-shortened. It should be about the first 4 words. Words are enough to have that work be recognizable whenever you go to look at it in your references sheet. If you do not have a date, you don't have to include it. You can just say author's last name. You should always capitalize proper nouns or titles when citing a source in your body paragraph. Example, according to Dr. Derek X, ... or in Mary Had a Little Lamb, ... You should always capitalize proper nouns or titles whenever you're citing whenever you're citing your sources in writing. Now, if you use the author's name in the sentence, you wouldn't have to include it in the in-text citation. So if you were to use, for example, according to Dr. Derek X and have a citation at the end, you would only have to include the publishing date of his work. You would not have to include his name again. The references sheet is at the end of your paper, and it serves as a bibliography, allowing readers to see and look up the sources you've used. You don't need to include the paragraphs you wrote for your annotated bibliography in your references at the end of your rough draft. If you would like to know about how to make these longer citations in APA, we covered that last week whenever we talked about writing your annotated bibliography. So please go back to that video and it will tell you everything you need to know about creating these longer type of citations. In order to properly format a reference page, you should start on a new page from your conclusion paragraph. You're going to, on that new page, center the word references above your sources. Your sources should be organized alphabetically by author's last name. There's no need to number them unless if you really want to. Numbering is not required whenever it comes to a references page for APA. Everything after the first line of your source should be indented by 1/2 inch. So if your first line is here, for example, the rest of your citation would be pushed back 1/2 inch. And finally, if you have multiple works by the same author, these should be in chronological order with the oldest first. So if you have a work by our example again, Dr. Derek X, and you had a reference again that was from him from 2008, and you had a reference that was from him from 2013, you'd want to put the 2008 source before the 2013 source in your references page. But that is what I have for you this week. All of your papers, from what I've seen, are looking fantastic. I think these are going to be wonderful. And if you have any questions about this assignment, please let me know. Don't hesitate to email or text me. It should be included in the assignment itself on ThinkWave. And I will see you guys next week. Have a good rest of your week, all right?